Sermon on the Mount Summary, Matthew 5-7 explained. In Matthew chapters 5 through 7, we find one of the most profound teachings Jesus ever delivered, the Sermon on the Mount. It is not merely a set of moral guidelines, it is a portrait of what life looks like under God's rule. In it, Jesus invites his followers to live with hearts aligned to the values of his kingdom, not the patterns of this world. A different kind of blessedness. Jesus begins with the Beatitudes, blessings that turn human expectations upside down. The world celebrates power, wealth, and self-promotion, but Jesus honors humility, mercy, purity, and peacemaking. He reminds us that God's blessing often rests on those the world overlooks, the poor in spirit, the meek, and those persecuted for righteousness' sake. True happiness is not in what we possess, but in who we are becoming in Christ. Influence that glorifies God. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. These words remind us that our lives are meant to have an impact. Salt preserves and enhances, light reveals and guides. When we live with integrity and kindness, others see God's goodness and are drawn to him. Our mission is not to hide our faith, but to let it shine. From outward obedience to inner transformation. Jesus makes it clear that he came to fulfill the law, not abolish it. He challenges us to go beyond surface-level religion and allow God to transform our hearts. Anger is more than losing your temper, it's the seed of murder. Lust is more than physical action, it's sin in the heart. The kingdom life calls for truthfulness, faithfulness, and even love for our enemies. This is radical holiness, grounded in grace. Practicing faith in secret. In a world that craves attention, Jesus teaches us the value of secrecy in our spiritual life. Giving, praying, and fasting are not performances for human applause, but acts of worship for God's eyes alone. In the Lord's Prayer, he models a balanced life of dependence on God, seeking his will, provision, forgiveness, and protection. Treasures and trust. Jesus warns us not to store up treasures on earth, where they are temporary and fragile, but to invest in treasures in heaven. Our hearts follow what we value most. He calls us to trust the Father's care, reminding us that worry cannot add a single hour to our lives. Instead, we are to seek first his kingdom and trust him to meet our needs. Grace-filled relationships. The kingdom life shapes how we relate to others. We must not judge hypocritically, but help one another with humility. We are called to treat others the way we want to be treated, the golden rule, which sums up the heart of God's law. A call to commitment. The sermon ends with a choice. Will we walk the narrow road that leads to life, or the broad road that leads to destruction? Will we build our lives on the rock of his word, or on the shifting sands of self-reliance? Jesus warns of false prophets and empty words, reminding us that only those who obey his teachings truly belong to him. Living it out. The Sermon on the Mount is not a checklist to complete, but a way of life to embrace. It calls us to deep trust in God, humble obedience, and genuine love for others. It is both challenging and liberating, challenging because it confronts our self-centeredness, and liberating because it sets us free to live in the peace and joy of God's kingdom. Friend, Jesus is not just inviting you to hear his words, he is inviting you to live them. When we do, our lives become a light that draws others to the King and his kingdom.